And we're live. Awesome.
Nice.
So this is episode 30, and I'm with Jameson Gahagen of Gahagen Laboratories. Kind of how I start every episode. Everybody knows that when you make an episode on StreamYard, it generates a Facebook and YouTube post that has the little blurb that I put with basic episode info for folks that don't know my guest, and with the hope that they will then kind of social media stalk the guest and check them out further. And I honestly just listed what probably looked weird as a whole bunch of adjectives to describe your awesome collection. and when we were messaging and you'd said, oh, there's going to be video, and you had set up with some of your enclosures, I was like, yes, amazing. Because, on, especially on your social media feeds, of course, it's a bunch of very cool species that you work with, but a big part that drew me to your feed and drew me to the things that you were doing is just how you do your enclosures. It's uniform, it's clean, well lit, planted. Like, I just love how you set it all up, and I was very excited that you said you were going to have it as your background, like you do. So that was really cool.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
For sure, man.
It took a long time to kind of figure out like caging for a lot of the different Phelsuma and Lygodactylus species I work with. And I've tried a little bit of everything, but over the years, I use 3D backgrounds, universal rock, even like the ones that ZoomEd and Exoterra provide, like the foam ones or the cork ones. And with a lot of the smaller species, it just doesn't seem to really, for me personally, and like, I mean, I'm mid 30s now. I'm starting to, my eyes aren't going uphill anymore. So I used to
For
be able to
sure.
spot baby geckos like there was no tomorrow, and now it's getting harder and harder. So I try to do something that I can see through to the back, just so you can get like a full visual side to side. And if I need to, I can kind of remove the tank and take it off the Mist King and everything, if I need to like really get in there. But I find that like sparse sticks and a couple of good plants, I'm a big fan of pothos. That is probably, a lot of people do really complicated plants, stuff that's super rare. And with a lot of these lizard species, they might not trample it, but your feed, crickets, they love expensive plants, it seems like. And monsteras, anything like that. Like they don't touch pothos, but monstera leaves, they'll get all the little holes in it and just rot the leaves away. And it seems like that's their favorite. The more expensive a plant, the quicker your feed insects, and it's just it's awful. But with dart frogs and stuff, you're feeding like fruit flies, stuff like that, that's not gonna just degrade your plants away. But with once you're doing crickets, anything like that, any of the worms, that it's a source of water. It's probably the only good food source in the cage for them, that's 24/7. So I always tell people like a great planted tank is amazing. But the camera's bouncing. But it just, the more expensive you go with plants, the more you're just gonna get mad at yourself afterwards. But bamboo, a lot of people hate it. I'm not the biggest fan of bamboo, honestly, because I'm always losing geckos within the tubes and having to like pull tubes out and everything. But as long as you can have them set the long tubes in an area where you can kind of freely pull it, or you can look into the cage into it, that always works the best, because most of these day geckos will lay their eggs within a bamboo hollow, and just to be able to get in there, you're going to want the clearance to be able to pull it out and everything.
For sure.
But and I've just, after years of doing the tanks different ways, I swear by this way now. And I also really like the uniformity setup where everything kind of looks alike. It just works with, if it works, why mess with it, kind of thing. And after getting, it started off with like 2 or 3 tanks, and then this is my second room. I'm going to be moving it all into one big room eventually. But, it just kept growing, and, it just seemed to work. So I was getting X amount of eggs doing it that way. So I just kept on going, and now I'm up to like 50 tanks, and there's like 14 behind me. But In front of me, I've got like another 20, and then like 4 over
Wow.
here. Yeah, I got my monkey tail skink enclosure over here, which they definitely need to move one of these days because that takes up so much room. It's like a 4x2,
Yep.
and it's got a trio. Great species. I love working with them. Definitely one of my favorite all-time species is the Crucica zebrata. I wish I would have even gotten more when they were really abundant because you were able to find all these other. There's 3 other subspecies,
Yep.
and
Right.
you mostly just see the one zebrata. But I mean, I think it's the Alfred Schmidti or the Guadalcanal
Mm-hmm.
monkey tails. Their eyes are just amazing, like bright neon yellows and greens. Um, and they're just a super smart lizard. Anything that lives that long and like can live in a family group, it's just super neat to like observe. You know, they might not be the most profitable animal, but I don't know, just it's like having like a cat or something. You know, it's that lives 60, 70 years. It's
For sure.
crazy because like in some of the literature, you know, you're reading about them and you know, like Felipe de Fasole, um, wrote the old book back in like the early mid '80s, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the monkey tails in it are like still alive today. You know, you'll see them pop up in a
Yeah.
Facebook group, and they're like, "Oh yeah, this guy was the model for the book cover," and it's like that book came out in like '87. You know, the thing was in a wild caught
Yep.
adult, and it's the same age as you know it got here the same year I was born, which is ridiculous to think about because you know we usually think about just chelonians being the longest lived animals or reptile in you know in the herp world, but there's so many other cool ones that just you know you can keep forever. There's not you're not limited by that like short. I mean, I guess most lizards you're getting like 20 years off of if you do everything right. So that's a long life, but I always thought just the tortoise, you know, anything tuataras, anything that lives over 100 years or close to it, like a human lifespan, it's just really fascinating to me. You know.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think it's super
But
cool that so I've seen bunches of different pictures of your various enclosure setups, and then to hear you describe that you enjoy uniformity and things, which is obvious from your pictures and your setup, which are fantastic. But it the very first thing I thought when I saw how you set things up was dart frogs, and it's a very common way to do them as well. But then to hear
mhm.
from you that you prefer simplistic plants, to be able to see all the way through, simple bamboo setups, that's fantastic. That and you're absolutely right that because of what you're keeping and then their feeders, that it always kills me to get really nice plants and have something
Oh
still like a
yeah,
cricket
yeah.
destroy it.
When
Um,
it's beautiful
so
in a
it
little
makes a lot of
pot,
sense to hear you say that, but I think it's really cool that
yeah.
it's still, very sleek, very uniform. It's beautiful pictures and it's still very simple.
Thank you. That means a lot. Yeah, it's always heartbreaking when you have like some gorgeous plant that you bought from like you know some rare you know genus or yeah, just something unique, and you've grown it for a few months and you have it like you know as big as you want it for the tank, and as soon as you put it in, it just doesn't respond well. Or you know, with these geckos, I've even had them jump on the tops and like just break the whole stem over with their weight, and just ruin something. And
Hmm.
it'll come back and everything, but it's always disheartening with something that's like $100 for little 3-inch clipping, and you know you nursed it and got attached to it for a few
Absolutely.
weeks, and then, yeah. To a point, these plants are getting to be as you know it's weird during the like I noticed during the pandemic like the house plant market just blew up because it's like a way that everybody wanted to like turn
Hmm.
their apartments into a little bit of outside, you know, and it was just a way to collect stuff during, you know, lockdown. Um, I don't know. It's strange. I've been thinking about the psychology behind it. That these house plants, like, I was talking to a guy at the Daytona show who was selling different variegated monsteras species for like he had what was it 8-gallon pots for like $3,500, and he was selling them. I mean, $3,500
Oh
for, I
yeah.
mean, to an untrained eye, it's just a bush, you know. And he said before before
Yep.
the lockdown, he was selling them for in the hundreds. And he said his kids like told him, you know, we're going to put all your stuff online. It's all going up in price. And he said that he just converted a lot of his greenhouse over to doing just monsteras and just killing it now with just a couple different species of
Absolutely.
plants. Yeah. And like all the greenhouses, I'm in St. Pete, Florida. So like just south of us, we have all of these, you know, in Homestead, Miami area, a lot of different Monstera greenhouse and shippers for different websites
Really?
and stuff. Oh yeah, tons. And
Oh,
I've
okay.
heard that they've been just locked up with orders for the last, you know, like they've got like just a huge wait list for just tons of clippings, different stuff like that. And it's
Wow.
crazy. It's just, yeah, the plant market's got it just bromeliads too. You just see, like, you didn't
Oh,
see stuff that
absolutely.
was that expensive before. And now it's just stuff just out the wazoo expensive, you know? But
For
yeah,
sure.
it's strange because the reptile market definitely went up a lot too. I noticed a lot of the day geckos already kind of work in this like wave trend where they're super popular. It seems like the dart frog hobby will grow a lot, and
Hmm.
people will love that color, that behavior, and they'll want to pursue something that, you know, occupies higher up the tank, so that they can set up something similar or even something that they can cohab species with. A lot of people will cohab a lot of different dart frog species like electric blue day geckos,
Okay.
the neon day geckos. I don't do it myself, just because the climate, to be able to do it properly, you need like a huge enclosure. And, you know, it's like either the dart frogs are going to be too warm or the day geckos are going to be too wet. Like you're just not really able to meet in the middle to get a healthy symbiosis with them a lot of the time. And
Oh,
just for the sake of, I just not I've just never been a fan of the whole cohab thing with different species, but I've seen it done where it worked great. And I mean, years of producing both the dart frog species and the day geckos that lived in there. And,
yeah.
you know, no issues. But I've also heard of some horror stories over the years where, you know, really
Absolutely.
expensive dart frog just got like really hungry and like tried to eat something, like a baby day gecko choked on it, and then you had like a double play right there with a dead gecko and a dead expensive frog. You know, horrible thing to
For
wake up
sure.
to. But yeah, in the last few years, so I started doing the electric blues. Before that, I did a lot of snakes. Probably around 2009, 10. And I got my first pair of electric blues in 2010, and I've been
Oh,
working with
okay.
them ever since. And you know, from there I kind of started growing bloodlines, and they got CITES listed. Like
Right.
shortly after I got my first pair, they used to be something that you'd see at PetSmart for like 50, $75.
Yeah.
You know, you'd see Triple L Underground Reptiles. All of the, you know, importers would always have them. They usually would
Hmm.
look iffy. You know, you can always tell with a lot of these day geckos that are wild caught. Um, they'll have kink tails, stuff like that. Like, um,
Sure.
real bad signs of parasite, you know, degradation, bulging eyes, all that, you know, kind of stay away from stuff. But
Right.
a lot of them made it, and were able to, you know, breed. And, you know, so there's a lot of good bloodlines still out there for the electric blues. It's just because it went from being so common in the pet trade to all of a sudden being so rare that I think a lot of people didn't really keep track of lineage, stuff like that.
Right.
Um, you know, they just went from keeping them to knowing that they were worth more and then selling them off. So you know, a bloodline gets reduced down to just the name of the guy you got it from. And beyond
Yeah.
that, it's nothing else, you know. Um, I think that happened a lot, so it kind of monogenized a lot of the bloodlines. So there are a few folks out there really started breeding them, uh, and I you know started keeping track of them as best they could, and uh, doing bloodline trades over the years and everything. They got a decent foothold, and they go through every few years. Everybody wants to get into day geckos, I notice, and then you'll see like a decline, and then you'll see just different species go extinct in the U.S. hobby because they're all CITES listed now. So the
Right.
last time it was the Cepediana, Felsuma's blue-tailed day geckos. It
Hmm.
got down to like just a couple bloodlines left. The different Borbonica subspecies just disappeared. You'll see a lot of inbreeding with them. Like you start to see like lesser quality day geckos every time that one of these kind of purges in the hobby would happen.
Right.
So, I would always kick myself for not getting into this species in this year because, they'd be like 4 times the price and like almost impossible to get the next year. So
Yeah.
I started collecting just this and that, expanding from the electric blues because, I had a lot of luck with them. And, I noticed that they were starting to get more and more popular. So I got into about 5 or 10 species to start off with of different Lygodactylus and Phelsuma. And I a lot of these animals aren't hard to breed, so if you just keep them right, they do their thing. That's why I kind of just did all the cages the same way after a while because it seemed to work. They seemed to live, full. I still have over right here. It's my original pair from 2010. And they're still
Wow.
going. I mean,
Okay.
they're retired now. They're not like producing babies or anything, but I have them in like their own little, retirement cage where they are on the normal feeding schedule and everything, and they just, do their thing.
That's
Female
cool.
hasn't laid in probably 2 or 3 years, but still look great. You wouldn't be able to tell that they were, 10, 12 years old now. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But that's the thing with them. A lot of people equate getting eggs to successful keeping, and a lot of the time they put everything into egg production. So you'll get healthy clutches a year or two, but the female will calcium crash or
Right.
just die out on you. And that's a lot with the smaller geckos. They crash quick. You don't get a
Right.
lot of outward signs. A lot of the time, you'll just find a dead gecko at the bottom. Um, they'll lose stick on they won't be able to stick on stuff for a couple of days usually, but there's only a few signs that they're not doing well. And it's kind of like dogs, how they won't show you they're hurt till it's too late.
Hmm.
It's not really like good for them to show you they're like, need help or in
For
a
sure.
position that they need help, because in the wild they're just going to get picked off.
Yep.
um I think that, yeah, there's a lot of people just don't identify it. They stay a bright color, they look pretty. You don't really look at the movements or if they are eating, but people are getting better. I've been noticing with social media, a lot of people like feeding their geckos and like tong feeding them on videos. So
Hmm.
it seems like people are starting to enjoy keeping a bit more, like instead of just like the status of owning, it's like,
Right.
the keeping process is more entertaining. And I don't know if it's because of social media and like the opportunity to be able to film it and everything, but if it isn't, it definitely helps. Um, but
Sure.
yeah, I've just the day geckos I found really easy for me, and I think I'm up to 20 species now. I think we're doing. Um,
Wow.
my brother does all the grandest. So it's Gahagen Labs is me and my brother, and my girlfriend, helps obviously, but she has her own hobbies and everything. But my
Very
brother
cool.
breeds a lot of chihuahuas, crested geckos, and uh, Phelsuma grandis, the giant day geckos. He works with like all the different bloodlines that are
Nice.
out right now out there, like the blue paradoxes, the crimson lines, and the normal blue bloods.
Yeah.
Real cool.
Very
They're
cool.
they're they're a real fun gecko. I work with just a little bit of the larger stuff. My thing is the smaller. I like the little tiny day geckos, like anything that's like 5 or 6 inches or smaller. It's I don't know. That's always been real entertaining to me. It's always challenging too when you have like little babies like that big to catch and stuff and rear up.
Absolutely.
Uh, but I don't know. There's just something to it. It's just really calming in a weird way to work with. When I was younger, it used to give me terrible anxiety. Like anytime I'd open a cage, but I've started to find that these animals are so small that they probably can't even perceive us as like a whole animal. We're probably just like some giant tree to them. And if you're not breathing hard and your pulse going, like if you're calmly let them hop onto you, you can usually move them from one area to another real easy. But it seems like the more
Really?
stressed you are, yeah, I think that they can honestly like feel your pulse through your hand, like if your heart rate's really going. So it'd be like jumping onto like a tree branch and feeling it like shaking real bad on you. And, you'd think something
Okay.
was amiss. But
Sure.
yeah, if you ever catching any little gecko, morning geckos, anything like that, take a couple deep breaths and just let it hop on you and just slowly move it. And they usually won't even care. They're just along for the ride. It seems like
Wow.
when you're having to like reposition your arm with them hanging on to you, that they just run up and try to get into the small of your back or on top of your head or somewhere completely uncatchable. Um,
Sure.
and that's like the worst feeling in the world is having a gecko somewhere in your house, especially if you
Yep.
have cats, anything like that. You're just hoping you find it before cat or dog does. It's never a
Yep.
fun time. But yeah,
So I do have some questions in the chat.
yeah,
One is about Phelsuma in general. Are there
okay.
hobby generated hybrids for Phelsuma, or is that a common thing to try and mix and match, or do most folks keep species to species?
So I've had a lot of questions over the last few years about the mixing of different species of day geckos, and for the
Okay.
most part, they won't. There's nothing really that I've ever seen hybridize. Um, the exceptions being like within subspecies, like the Borbonica complex, I guess you can call it. In the European hobby, there's like I think like 5 or 6 different localities and subspecies. So within Borbonica mater, there's La Crete. There's God, what else is there? Um, there's like 2 other localities within mater, and then there's Borbonica, and then Borbonica algelge mater. So they're found on another island, but same species. It's really confusing, but when they got CITES listed, a lot of people just whatever they had that was a Borbonica. It was here in the U.S., so put it with a female if you can find it. So nowadays, our different Borbonicas look a lot different than the European lines. I think the European line stayed kind of more true to the original lineage of where they were collected from. Um, but besides that, you'll also see like
Okay.
some of the rarer species that are within there's I think 5 or 6 different lineata subspecies, and you can't find certain ones. If you're lucky enough to have one of the rarer ones, you might just pair it up with a lineata because there just isn't a female in country, and there's no way you can ever get it. I think probably once a month I have somebody asking me if they can, do you know anybody that can import Phelsuma or Lygodactylus from Germany, from the UK? I know a guy that has some great stuff, brand new bloodlines in the US, and it's like they're CITES. Nothing you can do. Like it just what's here is here, and it's
Right.
unfortunate, but um, yeah, just got to try not to inbreed. It just with a lot of these because a thing with a lot of day geckos is in their natural ranges. A lot of the smaller species will inbreed. Just ranges are tiny. They occupy a small niche. So you'll see some, natural inbreeding and not have any issue. But when they're so, reduced down to 1 or 2 bloodlines, I always tell people if they're already inbreeding, no matter what's going on here. So try not to do it too close. Like, if there's one bloodline left, like Telsuma and Expectata, there's I think 1 or 2 bloodlines left in the country, and people will say like, oh, I don't want to get it from so and so because they're inbred, and it's like, I mean, he's breeding a male to a female, and that's all that's left here. It's literally like, you know, that female is
Right.
the only female here now, so it's not great, but it's, you know, it's keeping the species alive in the hobby, as unfortunate as it is. Um,
Right.
it stinks with a lot of those species. So I don't see a lot of hybridization, but a lot of people are curious at the prospect of it.
Right. So it was I assume it's Scott, because Ty doesn't usually comment in the Nature for You channel, but it was Scott Eiper who was making those comments, and he said more along the lines of hybrids that have come along due to a taxonomic split, a complex that was split up. So I think so
Okay.
they're from Australia, and so the I also listen and talk to a bunch of carpet python nerds, and so
Hmm.
um, they run into a lot of the same issues with
Yeah.
folks that
No.
are into
Absolutely.
Australian species have those
Yeah.
bottlenecks, because we can't get any more,
Hmm.
obviously.
Yeah.
But folks that are, I don't know how to say this, um, to have good knowledge of what's going on in Europe and Australia and places like that, you usually have to be a little bit more of an advanced hobbyist in the United
Yeah.
States. It's not like a common
Hmm.
thing people
No,
keep
you're
up with.
absolutely right.
Um, so Scott, if correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume you were probably referencing the subspecies that he was talking about, because that makes perfect sense. Where, if Europe has a good handle on keeping their subspecies split, but we get stuck with CITES, then you kind of have to do what you have to do to keep
Yeah.
the dominant species going. Um,
Hmm.
so I that makes perfect sense. So Scott, jump in the chat if that was along the lines of what you were thinking. And
Well,
then
also
Jessica,
species will diverge out and then reconverge years later. They'll assume it's a subspecies. Phelsuma grandis got split up from Madaгаrensis a couple of years back, and before
okay,
they were considered just the same, Phelsuma grandis, Madaгаrensis, but now they're, considered two species. A lot of the gecko species too. I've seen that where they'll get they'll change their genus name like 3 or 4 times. Like the, what is it? Underwoodsasaurus millii, the Australian barking geckos. They've switched
right,
between Underwoodsasaurus and Nephurus with the knobtail geckos like 8 times in the last decade or 2 decades. So they just can't make up their mind. So it just keeps on going back to Nephurus and then switching back to Underwoodsasaurus.
right,
Just getting funding for doing genetic testing and stuff, and finally figuring out where it actually is on the cladogram and everything.
for sure. And Jessica asks, what advice might you have for someone looking to start a breeding project of a species that is at risk of being CITES listed in the near future? Ooh,
That's a really good question, actually, because I have been doing the same thing myself recently, with a couple of the more common species like Phelsuma lineata and Phelsuma quadricelata, the peacock day geckos. They have been
okay,
getting the numbers have been going down every year with these wild caughts being imported, and they're you're un, as fortunately or unfortunately, we have a lot of wild day gecko colonies here in Florida. So like Grandis, you can go out and catch them all day in certain areas down south of me, or
sure,
they're popping up everywhere. So there'll always be a wild caught source for those that's in country. But the Laticata, the gold dust, they have colonies in Hawaii, so people are still able to get them in country. But the peacocks and the line day geckos, you're just not seeing them as much. They used to be a mainstay at pet stores,
hmm,
and the wild caught prices used to be like $5-10 per gecko. They're going up to like 20-30 for wholesale orders and everything. So you just see like it seems like they're gonna get listed soon. I mean, Madagascar is in terrible shape. It's
yes,
awful what's going on
100%,
there. And I mean, any reptile that depends on habitat there is losing habitat, no matter where it's occurring, and that and on the island.
For
So
sure.
anything from Madagascar, honestly, Phelsuma, any of the other gecko species, I always tell people, if you like it and you have a feeling about it, that's what happened with me with the electric blues. Is I enjoyed working with them. I like breeding them. They weren't the most popular gecko by any means, but if you enjoy them, you might, something you work with might get CITES listed, and then you're working with something that's super sought after one day, and
Right.
and then you have the opportunity to be able to work with other rare stuff. So I always tell people, if it's getting rarer and harder to get in the wild, get a solid CB pair. But I mean, even as unethical as a lot of the wild caught animals coming in are, is it right to take animals out of the wild? But they're losing their environment, so it's a double-edged argument. But at the same time, it's there's not going to be anything left in the wild. It's like tomato frogs in Madagascar. In what are they? They're extinct now, and I mean they're never going to be extinct because of the animal trade. They're $20 each, and I can think of
Right.
a dozen companies that have them.
Yeah.
And good genetics. They're not, inbred with missing toes, stuff like that. I mean, solid animals. Um, so it's, I think Tom Crutchfield said it a few years back. It's like conservation through like capitalism and exploitation.
Hmm.
We're able to work with animals that are, going back to the electric blues. Tanzania, they only occurred ever in like an 8 square kilometer little transect of screw pine forest, and
Hmm.
deforestation. I mean, human encroachment into habitat. It's all just, it's not like they'd have a habitat to go back to if we did like what they do with the terrapins in the Chesapeake region, re-releasing
For sure.
hatchlings and stuff. They just don't have the habitat anymore. It's you'd just be letting them go in like a hotel parking lot.
Yeah, my Madagascar nerdery is I like the Aplurus genus. They are
Yeah.
really small iguanids, Madagascar swifts, different things like that.
Hmm.
And it's the same way. They're a dry forest species. Um, I love them. I wanted to overtake the bearded dragon market with them because
Oh yeah, yeah.
um, no, I just think they're super cool, and they they're like squirrels, man. Like they run up and down the trees and they communicate with
Hmm.
each other, and they just do so many cool things. But it was the exact same thing where I just recently saw a couple, two of the species in the genus did come in on an import order recently, but yeah, it's just becoming more and more rare. And when you hear from folks in Madagascar, they straight up can't find them because the forest
Yeah,
that they used to go to probably isn't there, you know.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's
and
awful. It's terrible.
a few of the species, the distinction between two of the species that interest me is one is found in a national forest and the other is not. One second, I'm getting yelled at by kids. Okay, well, that was a child commercial break. Anyway, no, so Scott says the Underwoodosaurus stuff was due to mitochondrial morphology analysis that placed them from Nephorus. A subsequent study using nuclear genetic analysis with better resolution demonstrated the resurrection of Underwoodosaurus, and the description of Uviticolus was required. So yeah, we just got better equipment and better resolution in the
That's
studies
awesome.
and went back. Very cool.
Yeah, yeah. It's usually like a matter of funding and stuff. Like it's one of like when I was back in college, I remember there being so much talk about, conserving pandas and conserving the polar bears and, these cute species. And nobody really cared about stuff like bees, until recently.
For sure.
Usually the cuter stuff gets more love, and I mean it's just kind of our nature. But yeah, reptiles usually fall to the wayside, and especially these species that are like don't even have common names. They're barely described to science. Um, you
Yeah, for
just
sure.
won't.
One of the ladies who was a board member with my wife and I on the reptile rescue, when she was going through graduate school, her just recently in the last few years, her project was about bees in Illinois and the prairie and so on and so forth. And you know, I I remember when I was in like that was not a thing when I was in college.
No,
Like no one
no,
was going to
not at
go
all.
study bees. It just we had no. I mean, I'm sure some folks did because there's always people that are out there trying to get us to pay attention, and we're really not. But
Yes, no, definitely.
mainstream science and mainstream conservation for that part, you know, there was nobody out there like, yeah, bee nerds, let's listen to them.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
just
yeah.
wasn't a thing.
Or,
Um,
or like even
so
like
no, go ahead. Sorry.
like oh sorry yeah, like wanting to conserve like a species of tree because it's a keystone part of an ecosystem. There was never, it was always more of a this wood is worth this much, who cares about the rats and lizards that live in the tree, they can find new trees. But I,
Yes.
I think that I think that we've kind of grown a bit and realized that like we need to be more conscious of how everything kind of fits in this puzzle piece, because it's always something inauspicious. Like here in Florida, we have the gopher tortoises in my region,
Hmm.
and I mean to most people they're just a turtle that walks around. They're cute, kind of look like a mini sulcata, but their burrows, they dig these crazy burrows that are like they can go like 25 feet down, and they'll have like flood out chambers and everything. There's like
Hmm.
300 species of animals, like mammals, amphibians, different snakes, the eastern indigo snake, that use this burrow. So once you start removing them, like the indigo snakes, you don't see any of anymore because they've segmented the gopher tortoise habitat so much.
Right.
And I think that they're starting to see that you pull out one, it's like a Jenga game. You pull out one inauspicious block on the bottom, it's just going to cave in the whole thing. Even though the
Absolutely.
piece doesn't seem anything special, it's very foundation. You need it.
For sure. Yeah. My wife and I were fortunate. So my wife and I do educational shows with reptiles. That's our part
That's
of
cool.
herpetoculture. Um, and so we have a facility that's set up like a petting zoo, and we were fortunate enough, well, fortunate slash unfortunate. A gopher tortoise was illegally brought up here and ended up in the zoo system. And like most things like that, it was a spare male. It can't really go into
Hmm.
an SSP. It can't go back to Florida. They're kind of
Yeah,
in the wind.
yeah.
So it actually came to our facility. And yeah, man, like I had the enclosure is it's a 300-gallon trough with like 940 pounds of dirt in it that ends up being like almost 4 feet deep. And yeah,
Yeah.
he basically dug a mine shaft into that thing,
Oh
and
yeah,
he
yeah.
just does his own thing. And you hard, I
Hmm.
mean, you see him because they're like most tortoises, like they figure out the game. The big monkey
Yeah.
has the food, so I'll go talk to
Oh
that guy.
yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
but if he's not coming out to talk to me for food, like yeah, I don't know. He's that it might as well. It's just an enclosure full of dirt with like some cool plants in it.
Yeah,
It's not.
yeah, yeah.
There's. I tell people all the time, like I swear, it's a keystone species. I have a whole speech, like I
Hmm.
teach this whole
Yeah,
thing about the gopher
yeah.
tortoise, and they're like, "Man, are you sure?" I'm like, "Yeah,
He's the
I'm
worst
telling you."
animal ambassador ever. He just
Yeah,
there's nothing in the cage. Been
yeah,
coming here for years and I've never seen him. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
they them and all of our native box turtle species. Like if people you just don't really see them anymore, because habitat, like just the roads, like developments, subdivisions, everything, it's just encroached into
for
all their
sure.
habitats. So you just, yeah, I remember used to be able to find like it's ridiculous because when I was a kid I heard all these old timers in Florida talking about like the big snake migrations in the Everglades where you could like, oh, you're looking for scarlet king snake or 3 indigo snakes. You just wait at the migration and just pick them up as they go by. You don't need to do anything.
Yep.
And I mean, there's not anything like that anymore. Yeah, the
Yeah.
only big migrations you'll see in South Florida are like the Asian walking catfish. Like when it
Right.
rains a lot, like you'll get parking lots full of those, and it's cool. But I mean, it's not like something that's here supposed to be here. And they're
Right.
just like showing you that they can go live somewhere else in some other removed waterway and populate it now. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's tough with a lot of these species here because we have environmental regulations here, and to see it how different companies are able to skirt around it, or just it's not strong enough regulations for the environment.
Right.
That in other places that probably aren't as well off as America, that they're just trying to make an income off of anything. So
Right.
bulldoze this for us. I don't care. Like
Yeah.
animals are scary. Like you can't really blame people for not having the mindset when food
For
and
sure.
obtaining those necessary resources are still so important. Because I don't think like the blame should be put on the people of where these animals are being taken from. Because it's really like geopolitical. It's demand. It's like abronia. Abronia blew up in popularity. I love abronia. They're super cool. But I mean,
Actually,
they
I'm repping their
I
shirt
noticed
tonight.
your yeah.
Abronia Alliance. Yeah, man.
Yeah, great. I love a Brony Alliance. Yeah. But like, within a couple of years, they went from being like so common in every reptile show to just, you don't see them at all anymore.
Yeah.
And what you do see that comes in is usually pretty rough wild caught stuff that's on its way out, and like probably saw quite a horrible journey here from Central America. Yeah,
For sure.
it's um, I hope that Abronia keep in the hobby because they're just such a cool lizard. They have so much potential for them. Like they kind of bridge that whole world between like the tropical geckos and the chameleons because you can
Yep.
cage them. It's like that in between caging where they can be kept like cool. Really cool weather. Cloud forest is a really neat ecosystem for keeping stuff, and I think any animal from there is just real unique because it's like
100%.
something I've heard of people keeping a Bronia, and it seems like the people that are having a lot of success with breeding them are like Midwest, where it's getting cold, keeping them in basements and stuff, where it's like dropping into the 40s at night, and they
Yeah.
just love it. I remember a friend of mine that had gotten some Abronia like 5 or 6 years ago, just some Graminia. It was a guy in like Missouri, and he was keeping them outdoors and like letting them get snowed on a couple of times a year. I think you'd pull them in when it gets super cold, but he said he'd like send pictures of these things eating with like just white snow all over the tops of their screen cages.
Yep.
And yeah, they were cool with it. And it seems like they're at such a high elevation, but I mean, here in Florida, we just can't get that sort of cool temps. I mean, it's cold here for like
Right.
3 days.
Yeah.
So I think the Florida hobby for them definitely dropped off for
For sure.
sure. Yeah, you just don't see them even at shows anymore. Get asked about them all the time, though. Everybody's always looking for them.
Of course.
Yeah.
So you just sitting here talking, um, you have widely varied interests. You speak knowledgeably on a lot of different species, and you said earlier that you used to do snakes, and then you seem to have totally hardcore switched over your style of keeping and types of animals you're keeping. Um, so like what drives that? You were a snake guy, and now you're pothos and geckos and rocking out.
I still do
How
some
does that?
snakes.
Okay.
I still have some snakes. I kind of scaled back my breeding projects on them. Snakes used to be my primary thing. I think what it really was when I was in college. I could keep a bunch of snakes, and it was easy to, they were,
True.
I was able to go to class and keep like a rack of, blood pythons was the thing I used to love working with. And just over the years, I got out of bloods, but I kept some of my older breeders. I got into carpets. I still have some carpets. I do
Okay.
a few colubrids, different king snakes, Honduran milk, Apalachicola kings. I'm going to be doing some breeding with them this year. I love the different king snakes. The Florida, that's something road cruising, like going looking for snakes on the road that I'm like embarrassed to say this. I've never seen a wild king snake before. And it stinks because
Really?
I remember, oh
A
yeah,
native Florida guy?
never. Man, I've seen a lot of cottonmouths, pygmy rattlesnakes. I've never even seen an eastern diamondback, and it's like
Wow.
something that people used to see here. Like you get videos of people seeing them at like the golf course down the street, but like I'm out there looking for them, and I never ever find. I find a lot of cool snakes, but like never anything like I'm gonna like
Wow.
write about in a journal and like take a picture to commemorate. It's like mud snake stuff like that, cool, but like nothing that's like amazing,
Yeah. Yeah.
um never seen an indigo snake in the wild. I've seen all of this in like zoos and stuff, but that's like such a bummer, to
Yeah.
see like an 8 foot North American snake like in a little enclosure at like a reptile house at the zoo
Right.
versus like sunning itself outside of a gopher tortoise burrow, like catching that noon, getting all iridescent and stuff. Like that would be amazing. But yeah, it's herping here is a lot of water snakes, a lot of yellow
Oh,
rat
for sure.
snakes.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's about it. Honestly, like even like rough green snakes. I'd love to see a rough green snake, but you just don't see that stuff no more. Coral
Wow.
snakes, you don't see those. Never seen a wild coral snake. I mean, I could just be super unlucky though, because I have friends that do it and they find cool stuff, but I'm usually super mad at them, like, oh man, I should have went with you. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've seen some berms and stuff down south, but like nothing like how a lot of the YouTubers are, where it's like they're catching them like out in the streets of South Beach, like pulling them out
Sure.
of storm drains and stuff. You'll see like little ones on the road. I don't think you can get anything bounty wise for, like hatchlings, but you'll see
Right.
hatchlings everywhere. But that's you're not like filling up a back of a truck with like 20, 18-foot berms and
Right.
calling it a night. A lot of these guys, and that's kind of, it stinks, but I feel like that's why a lot of these new laws are getting proposed with like reptile keeping, a lot of the big snake stuff, because a lot of people for that internet cloud are kind of trying to embellish like the amount and
Sure. Of course.
ferocity of these snakes, because it makes for viewable content to like look like you caught like 6 giant snakes in like Homestead, Florida in one night. But in reality, if you're really lucky, I'm sure you could. But yeah, I've only ever seen a couple of real big ones,
Right.
bunch of little ones. Yeah, that's about it. But nothing cool. I would really love to see. I actually was hiking earlier today at a spot I know there's an eastern diamondback den, and I've never seen it. I found it shed like 3 times, like big, like 4 foot skin, and never seen the snake. Of course, my buddy went one morning and found it like sunning itself beautifully, and he got like some great photos. But
Of
yeah,
course.
I wasn't with him that day.
Yep.
I
Yep.
might just be super bad luck, because like I have a buddy that visits from up north. He breeds day geckos too,
Okay.
and I always try to take him out road cruising for snakes, because he's from the Midwest, so it's always there's milk snakes, I guess, and
Yeah, for sure.
like black rats. But it's always exciting to go someplace new, and I swear I think we've gone like 2 or 3 times and caught, and like I've seen a lot of dead snakes on the road. That's it. Yeah, we haven't
Right.
really found anything super cool or even like alive necessarily. Um, but yeah, I think I'm just really unlucky.
So Now, being in Florida, do you think that that is a driver for the success? It would. I mean, it just kind of makes sense to me that the things that you keep, you're a guy in Florida, and it's like, oh yeah, of course. I mean, it kind of jives
Yeah.
with what you keep. That all that would kind of work together. Do you think that helps you?
Um, to a point, I keep most of my stuff indoors year round. Um, but I know a lot of like my brother lives in Florida too, and he keeps like 90% of his geckos, um, like on patios and stuff because you can do that, and they nothing beats like that natural UVB and heat, cutting down on a lot of costs and just spray them down a couple of times a day and call it a day for them. Um, I think that definitely helps. I know a lot of day gecko keepers, can keep outdoors here. It seems to be more common to see Phelsuma and a lot of the tropical geckos in Florida, like just at a pet stores, Repticon tables. I've definitely noticed that because whenever I'm out of state, that's like one thing I'm always looking for is like weird, like just something different that you might not see in the Florida circuit,
Sure.
that falls into like the niche of animals I work with. But it seems like Tinley, I didn't really see a lot of day geckos. Yeah, and my friends that do the California shows, it seemed like there really wasn't much out there besides like Grandis, the stuff we have here. Um,
Right.
you know, Josh's Frogs does a lot of semi-rare day geckos, so like they'll be at the big shows out west or
Yeah.
Tinley, so they'll usually have a couple of things here and there. But
Yeah.
yeah, you usually yeah, honestly, I think Florida kind of is the hot spot for a lot of the Phelsuma and the more tropical geckos for sure. And it definitely, yeah, you can keep a lot of stuff outside. You can also work with like something that's kind of been a wall I hit was, when you're working with limited space, if you're getting in any wild caught inventory, like it's one thing if you like have a huge room and you're like keeping it at one end and the other, but when you start getting like a ton of inventory, you don't want to have a wild caught cage anywhere near like your established colonies and everything. And
Sure. Sure.
usually with these day geckos, they'll just die from parasites, but I don't want to be the first one to like encounter some crazy the new snake fungal disease, but in lizards, like
Right.
nobody knew about that and like it just decimated people's colonies, all over the country. Just being a single snake being in the facility. So being outside, I'm able to like quarantine incoming animals. I usually will keep them outside for like 6 months to a year. Just it kind of
Oh.
helps
Okay.
them get used to caging. I mean, you don't need to go that long. For me, I just let them grow a bit just to get used to, our daylight cycles, all of that stuff. I honestly don't really notice a lot of breeding activity from wild caught day geckos like immediately, um,
Okay.
unless they're coming in gravid. But it seems like they need a good season to adjust, and usually outside it just seems to kind of jive well with them to um, our sunlight and day cycle seems to kind of match theirs, humidity levels and everything. Like, never have any shedding issues, but it seems like a lot of the time it's a big shock from going outdoors to indoors for them. So just adding that on, I think that it makes it a lot more. If there is going to be an issue, it'll kind of present itself quicker with that added stress of going from to like dry heat instead of wet heat.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I've noticed AC seems to be a big thing with day geckos, and even like a lot of the New Caledonian stuff. But nobody keeps New Caledonian stuff outside, so there's no way to test it if it would work better outdoors. But it just seems like unless you're on top of humidity, a lot of these day geckos will get horrible shedding problems when they're transitioned from living outside in like 50-80% humidity depending on the day here to like a constant like 35% humidity when you're like in a house with central AC,
Sure.
even with a Mist King, because it's going to be drying out in between fans, all of that, just really really dry out cages. And that was something I never really thought about, was like how much a cage will desiccate, during a day. But it also seems to kind of help a lot of species too, because everybody always talks about having a thermal gradients within a cage, a hot side and a cool side. But I
Hmm.
also think that a humidity gradient's really good to have, because even though the animal needs like 80% humidity, let it dry out completely if you're going to spray it, again in 4 hours. It's not like Madagascar, the Seychelles Islands, New Caledonia, any of these places. It's just like a constant like mist or fog machine going, like just clouds always roaming over, and everything has dewdrops on it. Like it seems like a lot of folks will take like what the humidity is way too seriously, and like it's supposed to be at 80 to 90% all the time. But
Right.
the way I look at it is, yeah, you need to let it dry, because bacteria infections, fungus infections, the skin just won't shed right, and a lot of geckos, just because it's getting gross.
For sure. So what I know you talked earlier about misking a little bit. Um is that you prefer you set up automated misting and just roll like that, or is
Yeah.
that how you I mean having so many enclosures probably makes life a lot easier.
Oh yeah, I was kind of against doing an automated mist system for a while, just because you talk to friends that probably didn't program them right, or had something chew a line, or you always hear the bad stuff that happened, and it's like, oh my god, if I had 5 gallons of water just flood out my cages, it would destroy everything. But I've never
Right.
had any problems with my Miss King for the most part. Like I had a line crack the other day, but I mean that was like one cage got a little bit of water in the bottom, and just cut a new piece of line and put it in. But they really save a ton of time. You never really think of how much wasted time goes to spraying cages. Um,
Yep.
it's ridiculous. It's like hours a day. It really is. I
Hmm.
probably started saving like 3.5 hours a day, and I miss 4 or 5 times now every day with
Okay.
all these cages. Yeah, right now I'm using 3 of the 20 nozzle Miss Kings. Um,
Oh
I
wow.
probably, yeah, it's a bit ridiculous here. There's just a sea of tubing behind me, but it works. It really does. When I redo my room, I'm gonna be having it all in like a 15 by 30 foot. Like it's the length of the house. It's My house has a weird addition that was like a garage that got insulated and put on. It's a living room now, like a sitting room. But
Okay.
I'm gonna just door it in and everything, and turn that into my new lab, so I can have like an
Cool.
office and a spare bedroom again. Because right now I'm using 2 of the bedrooms in my house, and then the garage is all the snakes and everything. And
Oh,
every
okay.
time I've tried to build an office for myself, it just ends up getting more and more cages, and I can't package boxes or anything, or work on my computer, because there's like 3 enclosures on my computer desk now, or where my computer desk was supposed to be. So
Right.
I'm gonna try to do it all in one spot and have like an adult office, like a separate room with no animals. Do it that way. Um, but
Very cool.
yeah, I want to do all the misking, like have it all on one or two schedules, with a separate one for the nocturnal stuff, and
Oh,
that'll
okay.
be peace of mind for sure.
Very cool. So, I also all of the awesomeness that's behind you. It's again, your collection very clean, very uniform. Um, what are you doing for lighting? Because they all look very, very similar.
Yeah, so I've used the same lighting on all these. I use Zoom Ed 12 12 18s for my caging,
Okay.
and for that I found with the day geckos, you get a perfect heat gradient at the top, from like the 85 to 90 degree up in the top corner, and you get into like the low 80s in the bottom. So they have like a full heat, like run away from the heat. When it mists down, it gives them a dry area. It's just like for anything 5 to 6 inches or smaller, these are the best for a pair.
Okay.
Even like with the Phelsuma clemerized trios or quads, you can do in them. After a trio, I'd probably go to a bigger cage, but I do 50-watt Zoom Ed basking bulbs just to get that
Okay.
like nice tight beam, so you can get like just a little hot spot. And then the Zoom Ed 5.0 UVB, the coil bulbs.
Okay.
Bigger cages, I'll use the straight high output T5s, but I think I've only just used Zoom Ed lighting. Yeah, I think but since I've started, Zoom Ed's always been. I've tried out Arcadia and Exoterra and Zilla over the years, but I've just had the best consistent quality I've seen from Zoom Ed for sure.
Okay. Very cool. See, I like that. Tested it, tried it out. This is my jam. And then
Mm-hmm.
I know this works and just rock the line, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's something to be said for that kind of consistency. And then kind of the rhythm of the room thing that you hear folks talk about too in the same way, where, it would provide consistency in one enclosure, across a rack, in a room, and it just, those things have got to build off one another in just the
Definitely.
varying micro environments that you're making throughout, these two spaces.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's awesome. That's fantastic.
Thank you. That means a lot.
And we have there's a plug for your Instagram in the chat. Cole says you have great content and encourages folks to
Oh,
check it
thank
out.
you. I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. It's the same way, like that. Really cool species, really cool setups. And I think kind of you talked about it earlier and how it kind of comes and goes in waves for day geckos. I think that probably has a little bit to do with that. Is they're incredibly photogenic. They lend themselves to these very beautiful enclosures, and it goes along with the dart frog hobby, and you do get novice or newer people.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge attraction. Oh, it's beautiful, and I can play it
Yeah,
and do all these
that
things,
color.
and
Yeah,
full spectrum lighting, and just the coolest parts of herpetoculture.
yeah,
But a lot of the coolest parts of herpetoculture are a little difficult, a little more advanced,
yes,
and
yeah.
so I feel like these probably fall into that dart frog vein of there are groups of dedicated folks out there who are just killing it.
Yeah,
And you see, just wonderful social media feeds. Well, that's going to drive, every 6 months of new people, are
mm-hmm.
going to come in, discover blue dart frogs, blue
Yeah,
geckos with red spots,
yeah.
and it's the
No, you're
coolest thing
absolutely
ever
right.
because it's brand new to you. And
Mm-hmm.
then 10% of that new 6 month wave are going to, be consistent and mist and do the things that they're supposed to do. And turns out they have a green thumb, not a black thumb. So maybe they can
Yeah.
have a nice enclosure and,
Mm-hmm.
are able to dedicate the money to equipment, and that stuff all has cost associated, of course.
Oh,
Um,
definitely, definitely.
and so you can kind of see, how that wave that you were describing would happen of this is fantastic and expensive and plants
Mm-hmm.
and you're
Yeah,
kind of chunking people off as you list those things, and then you
yeah,
get to
yeah,
the end and
definitely.
it's like these 8 people think they're awesome. Okay. And then we start over with these 800 people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, I could definitely see that. Um, and I am now complicit in that wave because I'm telling everybody about your awesome stuff. So I'm totally fine with that.
I appreciate
I'm
that.
good with
Thank
that.
you, thank you. Uh, but yeah,
So
the it's crazy to see though. Like in the last probably 10 years, I've seen like 3 to 5 species just disappear out of the hobby. And you'll see
Right.
like 1 or 2 males left, and it's like, that's it. You know, there's like nobody else with a female. So it's just like this like sad lone male that's just gonna like die out, and the species is gonna be extinct in the US hobby.
Right. So how do you, I don't know, like to me, the it's not really a solution because there's not a great solution for that particular problem, but the a working solution for that kind of problem to me is, um and I'm kind of noticing a theme with a lot of the folks that I talk to that keep um stuff that is maybe a little more obscure or a little more advanced or what have you. You seem to get these more dedicated communities to these types of species, and it seems to be a little bit on the animal sales side, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot more on the community side of where you
Yes.
see a
Yeah.
lot of folks trading, and you see more of, hey, I know a dude who's got this bloodline, yo, I'll hook you up with a male.
Yeah.
Throw me a baby next year or whatever. Like, people start to get less concerned with the monetary side. Then you still sell animals or whatever. And
Yeah. Yeah.
but there is a lot more of the community side in these very specific species of the, kind of things that you keep, where it starts to become important. Like,
Yeah.
if you're kind of penny pinching on it, you could price or business yourself out of doing this because you won't have a
Definitely.
female. You're going to be
Yeah.
that one person with a lone male. Well, if
Mm-hmm.
I don't get $5,000 for it, then I'm not giving it up. You're just
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
going to get one, dude. Like,
Yeah.
you
Exactly. That's it.
it that rarity does seem to drive community because it really
Definitely.
requires community involvement. Do
Mm-hmm.
you do you do you see that, or is that
Oh,
something you've
most
noticed?
definitely. Yeah. It's like I even in my own collection, like doing bloodline trades, it's always nice to see that, where people are more after, you'll meet somebody, get like a message in my business message box, and what's your availability on electric blues. Everybody always is looking for females, and most
Of
people have
course.
huge waiting lists at this point. But what's the availability on a female? And it's like, I got a list long as my arm right now. I'm sorry, I got unsexed babies. And then a lot of the time they'll be like, well, I breed them too. Would you be interested in like growing up a female and trading her to me for another female? And like, to me, that's always cool, because there's like, if anything, we're both paying for shipping, but like, we're just doing this to like, better the genetics of our breeding groups. Like, there's going to be no less geckos produced working with the same bloodlines, but the fact that people are willing to diversify, when it does put an importance on it, for sure.
Cool. I'm
I definitely see
I'm
though that the
glad to hear
rare
that.
stuff.
It really
Yeah.
has. Yeah, it really has been a theme, of folks that I've talked to that, um, and I don't know. I've kind of said this before in probably all of my episodes because I'm probably repetitive about it, but um, kind of everybody I talk to or people refer me to, or they're like, "Oh, dude, you should interview this person," so on and so forth. Um, they're all cool people. Like, I I don't really get referred to or follow or I don't have interest in, that I've noticed, folks that would be that way, that would be like, it's $1,200, take it or leave it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I the I'm finding more and more that the community people are what attract me. And that
Same.
drive of herpetoculture, um, it's just a different vibe. It's a different group.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Of
Absolutely.
course, my podcast is, it's on the Herpetoculture Network, and that's just a bunch of dudes that like hang out and we all group chat and talk about the same stuff and trade things. And
Uh huh.
people like our group chat is literally everybody talking about their projects and are like, what's everybody's address? And is it cold where you're at? Because I'm just going to send
Yeah.
people boxes of stuff. Like,
Uh-huh. Yeah,
um,
yeah. Yeah. It does make it
and
so
it,
much funner. It really does. It does make it a
yeah,
total, it makes it a community. It goes from being a hobby or a job to being like your own little world, like there's yeah, having friends in the business is always great, like I don't know. I feel like there's nothing to really, after a certain age, you kind of don't have much to talk about with people. Like it just kind of like, did you see this on TV? Did you see that? Like having a passion in something and working in the same field it's just so rewarding. And like to have friends working on the same projects, but like 1,000 miles away, it's just super neat. Like I've made some great friends over the last few years. And I mean, like friends that like visit on vacation and stuff, like friends that like like if they ever needed a place to stay, I got a spare bedroom. Like it's cool. It's like you
right.
don't really meet too many people off the internet that you would let like crash at your house, like
Right. Yeah.
that you could
I'm
like
pretty sure there's a lesson about how you're not supposed to do that.
no, totally, totally. Like if like my mother heard like 20-year-old me saying this, she'd be like, no, no, no. Like this is like two tough
Right.
hitchhikers. But yeah, like I
Yep.
mean, I've met some great people doing this, and it's a lot of fun. It's the day gecko field. I've noticed has like some wonderful people, and I mean from all walks of life.
Yeah.
Like I've met so many different folks that do it, and I mean, we like wish each other Merry Christmas, Happy Birthdays. It's always like, it's
Yeah.
neat, and it's like a club almost that you're all doing something with animals, and it's just it's always been fun to me to work with animals. I mean, I've worked with reptiles since I was like 3, 4 years old, and it's for the first time, it's neat to actually feel like there's a community behind it. That I'm just not like the weird kid that has some
Right.
lizards at home you don't want to tell the other kids at school about.
Yep. Yep. I feel that story. Yes.
Yeah. uh,
So we are cruising on an hour and 15. So to wrap things up, where can folks find you to talk more about lizards and lighting and misting and all of the awesome stuff that you're doing?
I'm on Instagram at Gahagen Laboratories, Facebook Gahagen Laboratories, and I'm also got my own YouTube. I'm gonna start filming more episodes. I keep telling everybody, oh, this week I'm gonna start, but I need to get some more footage going because there's a lot of new stuff I want to do. But it's Gahagen
Very cool.
Laboratories. My show's called A Reptile Dysfunction. Um,
Yep.
I electric blues. I did a couple of medical videos administering antibiotics to snakes, stuff like that. How-to videos, caging. I'm going to be
Yeah.
branching into doing more videos on isopods, more rare day gecko species, a little bit of everything. But
Very cool.
yeah, and yeah, that's I think every way to contact me.
Awesome. All right, man. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and talking to me. That
Thank
was
you so
cool.
much for
Thank
having
you.
me. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. A lot of fun for sure.
For sure. All right.
All righty.
All right. That was episode 30 with Gahagen Laboratories. That was awesome. I'm so glad that folks in the chat brought up the Instagram and everything. It I wasn't kidding when I made the little blurb for the episode, like I always do. It His collection makes me think of the dart frog hobby. Very uniform, very sleek. I was super impressed with it. His YouTube is very cool. I really like the how-to videos, especially on some of the things that I don't do. My small geckos on his style, I only really keep morning geckos, and so seeing the various things that he does and the way that he does it um, just gives me more ideas. I love watching enclosure design things and how other people build things, especially folks that are in different parts of the country. That of course always plays a factor in how you're going to build things, with me being in the Midwest and someone like that being in Florida. It's really cool. So I am so glad he was able to talk to me. I was very excited when he messaged and said that he was going to be able to do video with the background being his enclosures. That was super cool. So I encourage you guys to check out his social media, give him a follow, check it out, and definitely check the YouTube, and you will for sure learn something watching him. As always, I'm on the Herpeticulture Network with Justin and all the guys. I'm having a great time being involved with them, being connected to them. It's awesome. I kind of have been bringing up our group chat, talking about how we get along as a small community that is kind of ever expanding. Uh, it's a really cool thing to be a part of. I'm very excited. And as folks have kind of noticed, I have the Black Box Cages logo in my little surround here for the StreamYard thing. Uh, that's really neat that they came on as a network sponsor. I am trying to get down to Atlanta in March with the guys. I would be very excited to meet those folks and to finally see everybody. And so that could be really cool. We'll see how things go. Obviously, being a Midwest guy, the weather here is terrible right now. Who knows what's going to happen between then and now? And Jessica, thank you for putting it in the chat. Another reminder for everybody to join USARC or renew your membership. And a super simple USARC thing that I don't think enough people bring up is, even if you do give money, but if you don't have the ability to give money or monetarily, that's cool. I totally understand. Just like and share their social media stuff and help expand their reach. That's a really big one that I don't think a lot of people put forethought into, is trying to play on those social media algorithms to help out the charities that you enjoy. Even if it's not USARC, if it's some other charity you enjoy, if you like and share their things and interact with them, you'll help more people see them, which will then in turn help that charity. So it's just something to think about going forward. So we will see you again in 2 weeks. Thanks for hanging out.